Hello, I want to inform you that this video is a direct continuation of the previous part of the story, the link to which I will leave in the comments of this video. If you haven't watched the first part, I highly recommend doing so to understand the sequence of this amazing story. Enjoy watching. Deciding to change the environment and spend more time together, Maya supported her husband's idea of going to the Congress. Time spent with Luke had become a rarity, and they both understood the need for changes in their routine. "Yes, that's a wonderful idea," exclaimed Maya with a smile, feeling a sudden wave of energy and determination. Luke became animated. "We can book a hotel near the Congress venue and stay there for a couple of days after it ends. We'll stroll around the city like tourists. Perhaps it will work for both of us to relax." Deciding to change the scenery and take a few days off, Maya and Luke began planning the trip. "We can enjoy some time together and break free from worries for a few days," Maya shared her thoughts. "I think this is exactly what both of us really need right now." After packing their bags, they met after a workday and headed to the train station to embark on a journey to new experiences and opportunities on an exciting and joint trip. "I'm mentally laying out plans for the 5-day business trip," Luke said, mysteriously smiling. Impressed by the idea, Meyer interjected, "What if I decide to accompany you? I can take leave at my own expense. We'll be together like inseparable travelers heading to the northern capital. We'll visit exquisite restaurants, spend hours at the Hermitage, immerse ourselves in the world of theatrical performances. Do you remember the last time we went out together?" Luke shook his head slowly. "Darling, the Congress will occupy me from early morning till late at night. I won't have free time for walks and entertainment. You'll be upset, constantly calling and asking when I'll be free. I've been through all this before, dear, and I don't want a repeat of that situation." Maya looked at her husband as if he was discouraging her from the very idea of a joint trip. Throughout their years together, she had never expressed reproaches or bothered him with trivial matters. She knew Luke as if he transformed into someone else in her eyes, reminiscent of his past that he tried to erase from memory. "Luke, perhaps you don't want me to travel with you?" Mayer asked, still holding on to hope for a different outcome. "I do," Luke bitterly replied, stood up from the couch, and began pacing anxiously in the living room, crossing his arms behind his back. Maya hardly recognized her life companion in him, with whom they had lived for many years. "But I want to work peacefully without being distracted by worries about you being in a foreign city waiting for me. I need to spend time with colleagues, interact with respected professors. I want to relax, after all." "Fine," Meyer interrupted Luke and nodded briefly. "I only ask that you don't worry so much. It will be as you say." Suddenly, Luke fell silent, settling on the couch and engrossing himself in a medical TV show. Maya, sitting nearby, occasionally glanced at him, but it seemed to him that he didn't notice her. They used to watch TV together before, and now they seemed like strangers to each other. People, children, shared property, the lack of desire to spend time together. "Perhaps this is already the end of our marriage," bitterness resonated in Maya's thoughts. "He doesn't even want to embrace or kiss me, and we haven't been intimate for almost a whole month. My husband hasn't even touched me." These thoughts weighed heavily on her soul, as if an entire world called family, which they had so carefully preserved for 6 years, was crumbling inside her. Luke planned to leave on Tuesday, and until that moment, nothing had changed in his relationship with Maya. He no longer initiated closeness, and she still watched Luke attentively, trying to figure out if he had lost interest in her or if it was her own thoughts amplifying the problem. "No need to see me off," warned her husband. "I'll head to the airport straight from the hospital. 5 days will pass quickly, and I'll surely bring you something from the business trip. So, what do you say, darling?" "Of course, I want that," Maya replied, her smile appearing forced. Her mood had been low for a while, and the situation with her husband's departure only worsened it. Luke asked her not to see him off at the airport, although Maya wouldn't have been able to do so anyway. She worked until 3, and his flight was scheduled for 5. Returning to the empty apartment became an oppressive task for Maya. She made a conscious effort to linger at work, pretending to be busy late into the evening with documents and reports, trying to postpone the moment of returning home as much as possible. Even the closing time of the clinic at 8 p.m. left her no choice. Maya had to leave her office and head home. In order not to sink into loneliness and boredom, she even enrolled in yoga classes. She decided that in the evenings, she would attend the yoga studio to avoid rushing home immediately after work. It was beneficial for her health and, at least to some extent, reduced the sense of anticipation. Returning on Thursday after her first yoga session, Maya felt significantly better. It seemed as if a pleasant sensation had awakened within her body. She was physically tired, but it was a satisfying exhaustion, and all she wanted was to quickly go to bed, to end the day as soon as possible, and along with it, the anticipation of Luke's return. Lying in bed under the covers, scrolling through her social media feed, Maya came across photos of her sister posing against the backdrop of the sea in a bright swimsuit. She tried not to succumb to envy, avoiding questioning the feelings evoked by these images. She quickly refreshed the feed to rid herself of the sight of her younger sister's happy and beautiful photos. However, upon refreshing the page, Maya noticed something unsettling in one of the published photos. Going back to her sister's page, she scrutinized the posts and noticed something in one of the photos. Her heart squeezed with a strange sensation as she saw a familiar figure reflected in a store window. It was the figure of her husband, who, it seemed to her, was photographing a young girl. This deeply shook Maya. Maya enlarged the photo once more to confirm that it was indeed Luke. She recognized his silhouette, hairstyle, and even the sunglasses he wore. He was wearing the plaid shirt that Hannah had given him on Defender of the Fatherland Day. In Maya's memory resurfaced the time when Luke had urged her to keep that gift, despite Hannah's intention to give the shirt to their father. "Why should I give it to your dad?" Luke had asked discontentedly back then. "Because it doesn't suit you," Maya replied, not understanding why this gift from Hannah affected her so deeply. Perhaps it was because the shirt fit Luke perfectly and Maya had never understood his taste. He always chose his own clothes in stores, meticulously picking shirts, trousers, even underwear. However, somehow, Hannah had managed to give a gift that Luke liked. Recalling how her husband refused her company to the other city, didn't want her to see him off at the airport, and even the food he cooked, giving it significance due to Hannah's visit, Maya grabbed her phone and tried to call Luke. However, the subscriber was temporarily unavailable. Seeking support, Maya decided to call Luke's colleague, Roman. He filled in for Luke during his absences. Maya had never called Roman personally before, so she felt somewhat uneasy. If Luke found out about her unsolicited call, he would probably be displeased. "Maya, hello," Roman's voice sounded soft and friendly. "What's happened to Luke? I can't reach him. Maybe he's having communication issues in the other city." Maya gripped the phone so tightly that her hand almost went numb from the tension. Roman's voice changed, now it sounded surprised. "He went to another city. As per my information, your husband went to visit his parents in Yekaterinburg. He told me his father fell ill, and he took a week off, covering all the expenses. His father lives alone. Does he fall ill often or?" "Maya, something doesn't add up." Maya remained silent, swallowing tears. She knew that Luke didn't communicate with his father, Istam, who had long been living in Murmansk with a new family. Ever since his university days, Luke had been traveling to Murmansk. He had told Meyer about this, but it appeared he presented a different version of this story to his colleagues. "Sorry, Roman. I think Luke's calling. I must have confused something. I'm a bit mixed up," she said, ending the call and tossing the phone aside. Obviously, Luke hadn't called her. She made up that story for Roman, who might suspect that Luke hadn't given truthful information to his wife and colleagues. Her husband's trips to conferences and official business travels were concocted for her and her colleagues. Dr. Luke was visiting his father while his wife waited for him at home, unaware of his double life. After a while, Maya's hand instinctively reached for the phone. She was grappling with her fear of discovering the truth. Her sister's profile, her trip to Thailand in April. That's when Luke went to Moscow for 2 weeks, and when he returned, he was tanned. Maya had been puzzled for a long time about how he got so tanned after that trip. "It turns out, it's really sunny in Moscow in April. I walked a lot, didn't notice how I got burnt," Luke explained. But Maya stayed silent. He often explained his tan with something mundane, like traveling to hot countries with her younger sister. There were other instances too, such as during Hannah's trip to Egypt, when Luke was also away. He claimed he had gone somewhere, like to Novosibirsk, but it was already summer outside, and his tan didn't raise suspicions. There were several such instances. This story began roughly 2 years ago when the joint absences of Maya and Luke from home became more frequent, at least since the December before last. At that time, Hannah had just turned 21. She finished college and started working as a receptionist at a beauty salon. However, she only worked there for a few months in December, then again in March and June, they left the city together with Luke. Hannah often talked about her new relationships, different guys. But Maya wasn't interested in her younger sister's personal life, and that was likely a significant mistake. Now she pondered whether Hannah had been seeing only Luke or if there were other men in her life simultaneously. Having lived with her husband for so many years, Maya suddenly discovered his lies over the past 2 years, his relationship with her sister, their travels around the world together, purchases he made for her, fulfilling all her whims. All this time, she was at home, tending to household chores, waiting for his return, never once showing dissatisfaction. Maya had become convenient for Luke, often labeled as a doormat. In the morning, she felt sick from her own thoughts. They had been swirling in her head all night. She needed to make some decision about her future because she understood that there was no future with Luke anymore. Why was this whole marriage charade even there? Maya thought. He would have stayed with Hannah long ago if he truly wanted to be with her, and he lost interest in me a long time ago. With Luke's return on Sunday, a kind of lightness began. He chatted cheerfully, displaying his tan, and a couple of times messaged Maya, sending meaningless photos, attempting to soften her vigilance. Knowing all of his betrayals, Maya responded, trying to maintain the atmosphere. She prepared for the conversation, attempting to articulate her thoughts precisely and consciously, fearing that later she might be ashamed of the words spoken. What do I want? Maya pondered. To become the subject of scandals and hysterics. To part ways calmly if Luke wishes it. But what do I really want? I want to endure, to be by his side. I am willing to do anything to maintain this connection. I stopped being an independent person long ago, I belong entirely to him. I've become his attached Siamese twin who wouldn't survive if separated from him. Luke was lively and cheerful, recounting his adventures during the trip, improvising events that never actually happened. Maya nodded in response, but with each passing minute, she realized she wouldn't be able to tell Luke about her own discoveries. She understood that she couldn't live without him. She couldn't initiate a conversation or broach the subject. After a few days, she calmed down and decided to stay with her husband. She loved him. Despite his affairs on the side, breaking the marriage would be easy, but preserving it, that was the real challenge. As Maya was leaving work and attempting to head home, a knock sounded on her office door. "The appointment is over," she shouted, but the door still opened. Hannah stood on the threshold, and inside the elder sister, everything seemed to freeze. "What's happened, younger one?" whispered Maya, her face turning pale. "We need to talk seriously." Then Maya understood that something serious had happened, something beyond her control. They sat together, avoiding each other's gaze, holding their breath. The silence in the room was so tense that even their breathing sounded louder. Hannah uttered 2 words that completely overturned Maya's life. "I'm pregnant," were the first words spoken after a long silence. Maya remained silent, her mind was swirling with emptiness, unable to utter a word. "Are you expecting a response?" Maya muttered, barely moving her lips. Inside her, everything froze, as if she had lost control of her body. "No need," Hannah replied shortly. "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant with Luke, your husband. I'm tired of hiding our relationship." Maya remained silent, unexpectedly touching a piece of gauze lying on the desk. She was paralyzed, unable to speak a word. "Are you hearing me?" demanded Hannah. "I'm expecting a child from your husband. We've been in a relationship for a long time. 2 weeks ago, we were vacationing in Turkey, and before that, we spent time at your place. Do you remember that casual dinner at your house? You told me to leave, and I left, but before that, I slept with your husband in your family bed." The words sounded harsh, and Maya felt herself stained by this filth. Maya experienced mixed emotions. She desperately tried to save her marriage until the very end, despite all the difficulties. But what was the cost of this struggle? It seemed like no one cared about preserving this union except for one, the child who so needed a father. No matter how this child was conceived, they weren't to blame for their mother's actions and their father's uncontrollable behavior. "What do you expect from me?" Meyer asked coldly. "For me to congratulate you? For me to create a scandal at home for my husband? For me to look in the mirror and try to find horns on my head?" Her voice was almost turning into a scream, but Hannah, sitting opposite, remained calm. This young woman had incredible composure. Despite her parents scolding her and her grandmother demanding self-control, it only irritated Maya further. "I want you to know the truth," Hannah replied, then stood up. "What you'll do next, I don't know. But I do know," Maya muttered through clenched teeth. Her sister left, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume. Maya tried to catch a whiff of her husband's scent, undoubtedly chosen by her younger sister. Everything in her family seemed fake: her husband's love, the idyllic picture of family happiness, their life together. There was no happiness in their home, it seemed. All that remained was spending time with each other. Returning home after work, Maya found Luke. She quickly kicked off her shoes, arranged books, a laptop, and a tablet on the shelf, then sat down next to the overflowing suitcase on the bed. With closed eyes, Maya tried to immerse herself in her emotions and feelings. Inside her, fear, resentment, pain, and perhaps disappointment raged, the latter being the most piercing. She realized her family was merely an empty shell devoid of true happiness. Therefore, leaving was the only sensible decision. Taking a sheet of paper, Maya, with a quick hand honed by years of work in the clinic, wrote a brief letter to Luke. I know everything about you and Hannah. There's no point in staying in this house. I don't see a future in this. Don't look for me, I'll file for divorce myself. We have nothing in common. Let's part ways amicably. Words failed Maya, so she didn't delve into lengthy monologues. She simply took her suitcase and walked out of the apartment. Glancing at the photograph hanging on the living room wall, a wedding photo of Maya and Luke, where they smiled at the photographer, appearing happy. Taking the wheel, Maya set the car in motion and calmly left the city. She had to cover over 300 kilometers on the highway. Gazing into the darkness, she vigorously tried to maintain composure and self-control. After 5 hours, she arrived at the village. There was no street lighting, but at the entrance stood a crooked sign and something resembling a monument. Stopping at the entrance, Maya got out of the car, breathed in the fresh countryside air, and only then allowed tears to break free. Throughout the 5-hour journey, she had managed to maintain composure and self-assurance. But standing there, in the rain, enveloped in soft, endless fatigue and longing, Maya seemed to have lost all remnants of inner strength. Once Maya reconciled with herself, she regained composure and sat behind the wheel again, heading towards the house that once belonged to her grandmother. This cozy house was only a few kilometers away from their hometown and had always been the property of Maya and Hannah's parents. Maya rarely left this village, situated 50 kilometers away from their familiar surroundings. Her warm memories of the house and her grandmother's property caused bitterness in Hannah. You always get the best of everything. Hannah would scold, tears audible in her voice. She couldn't understand why Maya always seemed to get the best. Hannah, calm down, Lucy intervened, embarrassed by her younger daughter's loud, hysterical outburst. Why do you need that distant house? Nothing gets sold there anymore, so there's nothing for you to expect, even if Grandma had left it to you, declared the older granddaughter. Maya remembered how often her grandmother had cared for her in her lifetime, visiting her in the village, looking after her health, accompanying her to the clinic. The sisters had little communication, often interacting only for financial reasons, which greatly irritated the elder granddaughter. Hannah accused Maya of getting everything easily just because of her looks, and after such accusations, she didn't speak to Maya for a long time. The cottage left after their grandmother's departure was small, quite worn, yet cozy and warm inside. Maya always came to this village with excitement and joy to visit her grandmother. All the items, photographs, pictures, and figurines stood in their places, as if time had stopped here during childhood when Maya was only 12 years old, spending summers here with Hannah. But nothing pleased Hannah. I don't like goat's milk, cow's milk is too fatty, I don't want pancakes, and I definitely won't go to the garden, so don't even offer. Hannah refused everything. Rural life seemed boring and monotonous to her. In contrast to her sister, Maya enjoyed her time with her grandmother, who worked as a veterinarian. It was thanks to these visits to her grandmother that Maya began to understand her love for medicine. You possess all the qualities of a future doctor, her grandmother affirmed, supporting her aspirations. At that time, Maya had already decided to become a doctor and felt that it was her calling. She was deeply grateful to her grandmother Maya for her constant support in choosing her future profession. Now, returning to this house, Maya decided to stay here forever, not just as a guest but as a permanent resident. Luke couldn't go anywhere else. There was nothing left in the house where Luke lived, no strength, no desire, no opportunity. Maya had no claim to this male apartment as it was his property, and Maya herself had no home of her own. Just a few weeks ago, the young woman was certain that she would be with her husband until old age, but reality turned out to be quite different. Sinking onto the bed, she buried her face in the pillow, the bed linen smelling of dampness. The house, left unheated, bore little resemblance to a cozy nest. Maya had a lot of work ahead, tidying up the house, quitting her old job, finding a new one, filing for divorce. But most importantly, she wouldn't have to see Luke anymore. Thinking about him, Maya picked up her phone and discovered 15 missed calls from her husband, 2 from her mother and 1 from her father. Amidst this, she pondered that perhaps Hannah hadn't called due to the joy of spending time with Luke. Dialing her mother, Maya honestly recounted what had happened, but her words found no understanding. It's time to close this chapter, she thought. Tomorrow, I'll get a new SIM card, this number will be inactive. I'll start the divorce process, change my life and job. Her mother was shouting something through the phone, but Maya paid no attention. The deep night fell, and Maya, engulfed in melancholy, contemplated the upcoming day, which promised to be entirely different from the ones before. In the morning, Maya woke up, tucked under the covers. The house held a cold atmosphere. A thin veil of snow covered the window outside, and Maya found solace in the fact that she had overcome 300 kilometers. She pondered, if the road had been icy, she probably wouldn't have dared to take such a reckless step. Solving the heating problem, buying groceries, and getting in touch with her previous workplace to explain the situation became urgent tasks for Maya. She weathered a storm of complaints from the head doctor but managed to arrange for her resignation statement to be sent by mail. "You've let us down," echoed the voice of the head doctor through the phone. But Maya understood this without his words. She didn't delve into the details of her personal life, just mentioning that she had moved to another city due to family circumstances. Sorting out the work issue, she donned warm clothing and headed to the post office. At the post office, the clerk handed her a blank sheet of paper on which Maya was to draft her resignation letter. "It's me, Maya," she weakly smiled, remembering how she used to visit this woman with her grandmother in childhood, peeking at the newly born piglets. The postal service operator, Kinsley, lived just 2 houses away from the estate where Maya's late grandmother had lived before. "Why have you come? And why do you need to write a resignation letter, Maya?" sighed Kinsley. "I'll have to get used to a new life where everyone needs to know all my business," thought Maya. It was a peculiarity of rural life, and Maya understood that there was nothing to be done about it now. Maya assumed that news of her visit to the post office would quickly spread throughout the entire settlement. She decided it was better to announce her presence immediately than to later answer a barrage of questions from the locals. About 200 people lived in the small village, and they all knew Maya's grandmother. Perhaps she was going to meet some of them, although she had already heard and remembered some of them. Share your impressions of this story in the comments. Follow the link in the comments of this video to watch the next part of this amazing story.